Among the pages of Brazilian military history, few names have a trajectory as unique as Bonifácio Antônio Borba, doctor, soldier, scout, leader, and patriot. He entered the national memory as the only Brazilian to fight in both world wars in Europe. His life is a rare example of absolute dedication to medicine, to his country, and also to duty. In this video, we will go through the timeline of his life, from his family origins in Rio de Janeiro to the last years of his career and his retirement. A narrative of almost a century of history that connects Brazil to the greatest conflicts of humanity. Before we begin, I want to invite you to become our student at the Sala de Guerra Academy. In the new course, Strategy and Tactics on the Map, think like the generals of World War II. There, it's an environment where we can learn in a linear way about all the battles, all the campaigns of World War II, and understand the thinking of the great leaders who played a major role in it. And all of this even comes with a certificate at the end, okay? So, to learn more, just click the link in the description or scan the QR code on the screen. I'll wait for you in the classroom so we can study together. Let's start our history. Brazil has several names that can be considered veterans of the two world wars, notably high-ranking naval officers from the 1940s who were part of the Naval War Operations Division in 1918. General Mascarenhas de Moraes, commander of the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, can also be considered a World War I veteran, since he was already serving in the Brazilian Army during that conflict. Even though he was not involved in any of the Brazilian missions sent to the old continent, but only one man left Brazil twice during the two world wars to take part in Brazilian expeditions in Europe, and that was General Bonifácio Antônio Borba. Bonifácio Antônio Borba was born on November 28, 1895 in the city of Rio de Janeiro, the capital of the newly proclaimed Republic of Brazil. He came from a family that valued discipline, education, and service to society. His father was General Firmino Antônio Borba, and his grandfather, Bonifácio Antônio Borba, was a Portuguese man who became a naturalized Brazilian and had fought in the Paraguayan War. Young Bonifácio grew up in an environment marked by civic spirit, at a time when Brazil was still striving to establish itself as a modern nation. From an early age, Bonifácio showed himself to be a disciplined, curious, and determined young man. His parents encouraged his studies and formal education, which would pave the way for his future career. Even in his youth, he showed a special interest in the field of health and saw medicine not just as a profession, but as a way to serve his country and others. In 1913, Bonifácio followed the path of medicine, dedicating himself to intense study and clinical practice in the federal capital. But during these studies, the world quickly descended into a cycle of extreme violence and destruction. When the First World War broke out in 1914, Brazil initially remained neutral, but after the German attacks on Brazilian ships in 1917, the country declared war on the German Empire in October of that year, and Brazil's first military contribution, although modest, was highly symbolic: the sending of a Brazilian military medical mission to work alongside the French army. Bonifácio Antônio Borba, then a young newly graduated doctor, nominated by two of his former professors, was selected to join this mission. Provisionally receiving the rank of lieutenant from the army, he set sail for Europe in 1918, carrying with him not only national pride but also the responsibility of representing Brazil in the greatest conflict in history up to that point. His father, then Major Firmino Borba, joined the Commission for the Study of Operations and Acquisition of Equipment, the group of Army combat officers who fought on the front lines against the Germans in the final months of the war. Thus, father and son crossed the Atlantic together to take part in the war. In France, Bonifacio had direct contact with the brutal reality of modern warfare. Brazilian doctors were spread out across various field hospitals throughout the country, treating soldiers wounded by gunfire, shrapnel, explosions, and even by the use of poisonous gases, a terrible weapon of the First World War, not to mention those affected by the Spanish flu epidemic. The conditions were precarious: shortage of medicine, long lines of wounded, improvised surgeries in tents and railway cars. For the young doctor, the experience was transformative. He learned to deal with mass trauma, with medical triage under pressure, with the human dimension of war, with mutilated soldiers, lives lost, epidemics that devastated the trenches. When he returned to Brazil in 1919, Bonifacio brought with him not only the technical experience he had gained, but also the psychological scars of someone who had witnessed the tragedy of war up close. Even so, his determination to serve the army and the country only grew stronger. Back in Brazil, Bonifacio continued his military career, being formally approved in a competitive exam in 1920. He joined the Army Health Corps, working in military hospitals on sanitary inspection missions and training young doctors. He was gradually promoted, rising to the ranks of captain, major, and lieutenant colonel. Shortly after returning to Brazil, he also started a family. He got married in 1920 to a young woman from Curitiba named Elvira de Andrade Neves, great-granddaughter of General José Joaquim de Andrade Neves, the Baron of Triunfo, who played a leading role in several important actions during the Paraguayan War. With her, he had several children. The first of them, Carlos Borba, born in 1921, would become a naval officer. There was also Roberto Borba, born in 1934, who would become a leader of Esporte Clube Internacional of Porto Alegre, and Eurico Borba, born in 1940, who would become president of Instituto Brasileiro de Geografia e Estatística. Bonifacio's personal life was marked by a balance between his dedication to his family and his military and medical career, with him practicing medicine part-time in every place where his military service transferred him. In addition, starting in 1930, Bonifacio played an active role in scouting, an educational movement focused on schooling and the development of young citizens. This experience reinforced in his life the values of discipline, leadership, and community spirit, virtues that would later be fundamental in his actions as a commander on the battlefield. Joining the Brazilian Federation of Sea Scouts, the Old Octopus, as he was known, he corresponded with General Robert Baden-Powell, founder of the Scouting movement, and translated his book, Hovering to Success, into Portuguese. The interwar period was a time of great transformation for the Brazilian army, which was always seeking to modernize itself. Bonifacio took part in this modernization in the health sector, introducing medical practices he had learned in Europe. He also worked as an educator, training new generations of military doctors for the force. His scouting activity also remained intense. He got involved with scouting groups in Rio de Janeiro, helping to train young leaders. Scouting reinforced his image as an exemplary citizen committed to moral and patriotic values. When World War II began in September 1939, Brazil once again maintained its initial neutrality. However, after successive German attacks on Brazilian merchant ships in early 1942, the country declared war on the Axis. Then, in the following year, the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, or Brazilian Expeditionary Force, was formed, which would be sent to fight in Italy alongside the Allies. In this context, Bonifacio was already a senior officer and was in command of the Army Hospital in Santa Maria in Rio Grande do Sul. But his rare experience of having served in Europe during World War I resulted in his transfer to Rio de Janeiro to prepare once again for war operations. Thus, in February 1944, he was chosen to command the 1st Health Battalion of the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, with the rank of Medical Lieutenant Colonel. The Health Battalion had been created in 1943 as an essential part of the Brazilian Expeditionary Force's structure. Its mission was clear: to ensure immediate medical care for those wounded in combat, organize their evacuation, maintain hygiene, and control diseases. Under the command of Bonifácio, the battalion was made up of treatment and evacuation companies, as well as support teams. The training was intense. Doctors, nurses, stretcher bearers, and drivers learned to work under fire, to set up field aid stations, and to transport the wounded over difficult terrain. Bonifácio also had the distinction of commanding the first female military contingent in the history of the Brazilian Army, leading into combat the group of 67 Brazilian military nurses who served with the Brazilian Expeditionary Force. On September 22, 1944, he, along with the battalion command, set sail for Italy aboard the American transport ship United States ship General Mann, with the 2nd echelon of the 1st Expeditionary Infantry Division. Aboard the American escort destroyer United States ship Cannon, which accompanied the troop ship to the Strait of Gibraltar, the liaison officer was 2nd Lieutenant of the Navy, Carlos Borba. And then, coincidentally, once again, 24 years later, father and son crossed the Atlantic together, heading to a world conflict. In the Italian theater of operations, the medical battalion commanded by Bonifácio was put to the test. The initial period of adaptation to the American combat structure was completed with complete success. But the harsh winter, the precarious mountainous terrain, and the violence of the fighting demanded resilience and a lot of organization. In battles like Monte Castello and the capture of Montese, the Brazilian Expeditionary Force's medical service proved to be vital. Under the direct supervision of Bonifácio, the advanced aid stations were set up close to the front lines. The wounded received first aid, were stabilized, and evacuated to rear hospitals, sometimes even evacuated to the United States. The work was relentless. Days and nights of surgeries, amputations, sutures, transfusions, and resuscitations. Bonifácio himself went around the units inspecting, guiding, and encouraging his subordinates. His strong leadership inspired confidence in the soldiers and doctors. The health battalion saved thousands of lives. Even under enemy fire, the stretcher bearers carried the wounded, often risking their own lives. Bonifácio was fully aware that without this structure, the Brazilian Expeditionary Force would not have been able to maintain its combat operations. More than that, the Brazilian doctors were tireless in caring for the Italian civilian population trapped in the terrible battlefield. Especially during the harsh winter of 1944 to 1945, the Health Battalion provided vital assistance so that many children and adults could survive the rigors of the season, given the dire situation they were in. With the victory of the Allies in 1945, the Brazilian Expeditionary Force returned to Brazil to popular acclaim. Bonifácio returned not only as a warrior of 2 wars, but also as a respected commander, decorated with the 2nd-class Combat Cross and also the American Bronze Star. His experience as a military medical leader was widely recognized. Back in the country, he continued serving in the Army in administrative roles as well as teaching, passing on his knowledge to new generations. His career continued until he reached the rank of Medical Division General in 1951, crowning decades of service. After leaving active service, Bonifácio dedicated himself to medicine and his family. He continued to serve as a moral and professional reference, participating in military events, veterans associations, and also in civic activities. He was a pioneer in preventive practices for gynecological cancer, producing and distributing explanatory pamphlets about feminine hygiene and special care during pregnancy. He was awarded the Medal of the Brazilian Academy of Medicine. His life was an example of balance between military duty, the medical profession, and family life. He passed away in Porto Alegre in Rio Grande do Sul on August 15, 1980, at the age of 84, concluding a remarkable journey in 20th century Brazil. The legacy of Bonifácio Antônio Borba remains alive. He is remembered as a symbol of Brazilian commitment to peace and solidarity in times of war. His leadership of the Health Battalion was crucial for the effectiveness of the Brazilian Expeditionary Force and for the preservation of countless lives. The life of General Bonifácio Borba shows how a man can go through 2 world wars without losing his humanitarian essence. As a doctor, he saved lives. As a military man, he organized and led with discipline. As a citizen, he served the country and the community. In a destructive century, his story shows that even during war, some dedicate themselves to healing, protecting, and saving. This is the true greatness of General Dr. Bonifácio Antônio Borba, the Brazilian who was in the 2 greatest wars of the 20th century and who left as his legacy not destruction, but life. Are you curious to understand how the Brazilian Expeditionary Force's operations actually happened on the battlefield? Even better, do you want to know how all the great campaigns of World War II unfolded according to the minds of their commanders? Then come study with us in the new course Strategy and Tactics on the Map and think like the generals of World War II. To learn more, just click the link in the description or scan the QR code that's right here on the screen. I'll wait for you in the classroom. If you liked it, share this video and also subscribe to the War Room so you don't miss anything else. My book, The Atom as a Weapon, about atomic bomb history, is for sale here. But for now, I'll stop here, once again thanking you for watching and sending you a big hug from the War Room.